Great. So I'm going to start this off. I have to apologize. Unfortunately, my computer has thrown me a few curveballs and my camera hasn't been working for a little while. I apologize for that. So you'll have to make do with my voice only and Michael and Bernard are on camera, so you can see their faces. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tabitha and I work at INAS, specifically in the Author8 team. So I've been helping coordinate the facilitators on the MOOC that some of you have been on, and also in touch with NHR, which you've been invited through. So I'm really glad to have you here. We have two great guest speakers on the session today. We have Dr. Michael Head and Dr. Bernard Appia, joining from the UK and joining from Syracuse University in the US. Both were in Ghana recently, I think, funnily enough. And yeah, they're very excited to run the session with you today. Before we get into it, I wanted to send you a Mentimeter link that I'll put in the chat right now to see where you are all at mentally right now with grant proposal writing. So please could you click the link in the chat. And there are 4 quite simple, straightforward questions, if you don't mind answering them, and then we'll have a look at what everyone's saying. Just to let you know, the results are anonymous, so your names will not be displayed. So you can answer them freely and no one will know what answer you put. All right, we already have some answers coming in, so I'm going to start sharing the results. All right. Quite a few people think of grant proposal writing right now as a tangled mess. Hopefully by the end of the session, you would be able to select a different picture. A few people feel excited about it. Some people feel like it's a puzzle to solve. Some people are think there's a lot of teamwork involved, and also an equal amount of people who selected also future success. So they're hoping for future success, hopefully after the session. No one feels like they're in a dark tunnel right now, so that's good. Yeah, we have some more results coming in, so do keep voting. Let's go to the next question. Oh, the words are coming in. So what's the most important difference between a research paper and a grant proposal? So we have a few words coming in here. Someone says the difference is asking for money, has to be convincing, the processes, funding, donors and budget, research papers about results, action before proposal, the requirements might be different. Okay. There's some more coming in. Budget justification, so quite a few people are talking about budget and money. Budget is coming up more strongly now, and funding as well. Someone says it's harder. And collaboration is required. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Please think of keywords that communicate your proposal's expected impact. So we have accountability, improve, innovative, several steps, accountability, quality, improve, interesting, universal health coverage, life-changing, wow, accountability, integration, success, quality is coming up more strongly, has to be timely, garnering, novelty, okay. Let's see if a few more come in. Access to education, okay, and capacity building, interesting. Quality seems to be the key word here so far. Let's see, the next one says, please think of the key aspects that you will need to address for your proposal to be believable and feasible. So some people say it needs to be a game changer, there need to be stakeholders, collaboration, it needs to be reliable, there needs to be a team. Solution, person-centered care, so that's specific to health. Involvement, there needs to be a clear idea, okay. And proper budgeting. Oh, the word cloud is evolving rapidly. Expertise, track record, okay. Don't overpromise, interesting. Realistic goals, quite strongly related to that. Reliable and accurate. Have some previous experience. Another person talking about stakeholders, interesting. Yeah. So it looks like a lot of you are aware of some of the key aspects. Let's see if they overlap with what Michael and Bernard have to talk to us about. But it looks like you already have some ideas about grant proposal writing, and now I'll hand over to Michael and Bernard. Bernard, going first, to talk to you more about grant proposal writing, and you will have the chance to ask plenty of questions. So if you have any questions at all, please do pop them in the chat box at any point, and we will pick them up right after the speakers have spoken. And we hope to have a quite interactive session. So please don't shy away from questions. There are no stupid questions. Anything you're wondering about in relation to grant proposal writing, nothing's off limits. So please do ask your questions. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Bernard Becker.
Hi, thank you very much. Just checking. Did you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Just okay. Yeah, do you see it in a bigger format, right?
It's in presenter mode, Bernard,
Yeah,
rather than full
we
screen.
see the presenter view.
Okay. Let me. Sorry about that. Let me just. Let me stop sharing. Okay, give me. Is it better now?
Much better.
Is it better now? Yeah.
We see the presenter view still, Bernard.
So if you click on display settings at the top, you can switch the view at the top of that screen. In the middle?
Just go up, not left.
Top left.
There.
Display settings. Next to the mouse.
If you go to the just slightly right, Bernard, there's display settings.
Sorry, I'm not.
Where your mouse is, but a little bit to the right.
Okay.
It says display settings.
I don't say.
It says taskbar, display settings, and end slideshow up at the top left.
Just above where your mouse is. Yeah.
I'm not seeing anything here on my end here. I just sorry, my computer just uploaded, and then the usual thing that I do has just messed me up a bit, but I should be able to get get it up soon.
While we're waiting, just keep introducing yourselves in the chat. If you have any general questions about grant proposal writing, you could already put them in the chat and we'll see if they'll be answered in the presentations. And if not, we'll answer them afterwards.
That's much better.
This is better, but this shouldn't have this slide down here. It should be a complete one. But this is at least better, right?
Yes, I mean we can still see the slide, so maybe just use that view.
Okay. Okay, sorry about this. Yeah, so my name is Bernard Apia. I happen to be author steward, and I am also assistant professor in the Department of Public Health, Syracuse University. I also do research in health communication and public engagements. And so I direct this program right here in the US, Syracuse University. And I also work at the Center for Science and Health Communication, the director in Ghana. Okay, so basically, you know me a little, but you also get to know me a little more. Basically here, I want to let you know like what to decide whether you are even supposed to submit an application or not, and how to know your reviewers, and then the anatomy of a grant reviewer, physiology of a grant reviewer, and also we will conclude. I had my first degree in Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Kumasi, Ghana, where I had my pharmacy, and then I had a master's in development communication from the University of the Philippines, Open University. And then I had master's in science and technology journalism and doctorate in public health in Texas A&M University in the US. Now, in terms of grant writing experience, I have written a number of applications to the National Institute for Health and the NIHR, the group, the funder that obviously many of you are very much interested in. And then the National Institute of Health in the US, Gates Foundation, Grand Challenges Canada, and Wellcome Trust. I have been successful in all of these, although I would say for some of them, I have been successful as a principal investigator and some too as co-investigator. I started reviewing grants quite early in my career, so I've been reviewing grants since 2008. Now, let's say we have a call for proposal. You want to decide, should I submit an application or I should not submit an application? And this is a decision that sometimes it is not easy, but let's see how to navigate it. So first of all, you want to know the deadline. Is this something that is due in about a week's time, 3 months' time, 6 months' time? Or do you or your collaborators have enough time? And of course, there are several other considerations that like you need to think about. For example, sometimes some grants may be the type that will call for more collaboration. Some too may even be about like a fellowship type of grant, which is more one-centered. So you need to consider all these things as you consider the time. Now, one other thing that you want to look at is, does the call for proposal align with your expertise and goals? And does it also call for, does that align with those of your team also? The expertise of your team. Does it look like, Eureka, they have found me or my team? Some applications, as soon as you see it, oh, this was made as if they had me in mind. Some too, it's like you are deciding, maybe I could be in there, but I'm not very sure. Or even my team. So you need to consider all this kind of alignment as you think about applying for the grant. Now, some grants obviously will need institutional approval prior to submission. Some you can submit and then let your institutions know. So some, obviously you will need some letters. So once you consider all these things, because if it is you alone, You know, I have this man who once said that he prefers to be an equation in which he is the only variable, meaning that he can do all things by himself. But unfortunately, in grant writing, it doesn't work like that. Even for grant that may not be collaborative grants, if you require institutional letters and other things, you have to definitely get some people involved. And you also want to ask, do you need external collaborator? And actually, do you have one? So once you are deciding, all these things become very, very important. And also, whereby you have to get letters, even your approach to getting those letters may be very key to how you get a good one. Now, you have to also examine yourself. You examine yourself like, why me? Why us? And why now? Now, some applications would have previous recipients on the website. So you could look at those ones and see whether they align with yours. And of course, you want to seek opinions of people that you trust, including your mentors. Some grants, once some people get some idea from you, they could easily take it from you. It has happened to me before, where I was collaborating with a few people, and then later I got to know they were actually planning to submit it. So they submitted it, now without me, unfortunately. So you need to have people that you trust, that you can talk with. And then, is this a one-off call for proposal? Some calls are consistently given, like once a year, sometimes twice a year. So then if you see it and then you find like, oh, maybe at this time I am not very ready. And so given this is a repeated call, when it comes again, by that time we should be ready, But some calls too are just one time. And so that one is like, you really have to be prepared for it as well. Okay. Now, whether to submit or not to submit, you call the shot. So you have to decide to submit or not to submit. But in any case, you have to be happy about the decision that you have taken. Okay, it's not always that. Sometimes, the idea comes, you look at it, and it's like, oh, maybe we don't have enough time, and we may not submit a very good application. Or sometimes, like, you realize that, this one, they are calling for only about 5 applications. Well, they want to find only 5 recipients. If that is the case, or like compare an application that they say they are giving grant to at most 20, and some to is like only about 3, so you have to consider all those things. Now, I'm not saying that if they are calling for very few applications, it doesn't mean you shouldn't apply, but obviously that means it's very competitive. Yeah. So you want to be sure that you are the one, and then you could then apply for it. Great. So I've just finished one part of my wearing hat, which is more about the writing of grants. And now let's come to review of grants. Now, when you submit an application, typically the institution, the funder has a few people internal. They go through it and make sure that it aligns with the proposal before they think about sending it to reviewers. So let's assume that they have done that, and then they now want to send to reviewers. So these reviewers typically are not employed to review grants. Okay, they just do it on voluntary basis. Okay, so people have to squeeze their time to review. For example, sometimes I review grant after a day's work. Sometimes when I'm relaxing on my bed, I have a hard copy in front of me, just going through it to see what the whole proposal is about. Now, a very good grant proposal makes me sleep faster. Is that true? Nope. A very poor one actually makes me sleep faster, because then you just look at it, it's like, what is this, And then an excellent grant proposal makes me stay awake, okay? Because now it's so good that like you just feel like, yeah, this is cool, So you go through all those things. And then one of the things for physiology, one of the things you have to do is proposals have abstracts or summary, you know, they have different names for it, but it's a very important document. It's my door. I enter the application through it. Okay. Then I also look at the goals of the funder and those of the proposer and then match them. Okay. For many of you will know about SMART objectives, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. If the goals don't match yours, if the funder's goals don't match yours, an application is in trouble. Now, if they slightly match, an application begs me. Yeah. If they very much match, then an application commands me. But I used to have a physics teacher in high school who was teaching us how to do well in exams. So he once told us that, hey, if you are writing exams, write to command the examiner. Don't write to beg the examiner. Because like when you write it so well, the examiner has no choice but to give you the points you deserve. The same way with grant writing, if you write it so well, everything connects very well, you could easily command the reviewer to give you high marks. Now, and then as I sit down, when I'm off my bed and I'm also going through the application carefully, I look at background information, the rationale for the project. Sometimes people make assertions without references. That can be may not be a good approach. I also look for innovation. So what is new about this proposal? What is new about this proposal? And then I look for so who is behind the proposal? I mean, what makes this applicant or this team so qualified to do this work? So sometimes you may have a great idea, but your team or your expertise may not fit very well. And that is where you need collaborators who can fill in where you cannot, meet some kind of requirement. Okay, then I look at the objectives, how they plan to actually test the objectives, and then the budget. It's very interesting. Budget came up in our earlier call. So questions. So it's something and I have to disseminate the findings. So if a good application gets to me, obviously it makes me sit comfortably, but a bad application makes me extra alert. Okay. So, deciding whether to submit a grant application calls for more considerations. Don't just see an application and say, oh yeah, let me go for it. Look for certain indicators and make it work. And you ought to also know that grant reviewers typically squeeze their time and to help you and the funder. So you have to also help them. Now, you have to know the song of the funder and sing it well so a reviewer could dance to your version. Reviewers also have guidelines they follow. They want to see whether grants will help funders achieve their aims. So they look for them. So if you sing their song very well, when you're writing for a grant application, obviously make sure it aligns with the mission of the institution very well and the kind of call they are also asking for. And then please pay particular attention to the proposal or summary. It is very, very important. And I want to say that you should let your application command reviewers, not beg them. An application that begs reviewers could be in serious, serious trouble. So yeah, thank you so much. We'll have time for questions, but I'm sure that my colleague will present. And then after that, we would have more questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Bernard. Do keep putting your questions in the chat. And Bernard, yeah, stop sharing your screen. And we'll hand over to Michael now.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Bernard. I very much agree with what Bernard said. And I particularly like the aspect about sing the song of the funder as well. That's quite a nice way of putting it. Hopefully you're able to see my screen. Hopefully it's full screen as well. I think I've done it right.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. Excellent. So yes, I am a researcher at University of Southampton in the UK. I've been involved in research for a few years, have submitted many grant applications, had many of them rejected and a few accepted, so I can share some aspects about a side that we don't talk about too much. We often talk about how to get the science right, which of course is super important, but the actual administration of the grant application is more complex than many people imagine or many people remember. Just briefly about me. So yeah, I've done education in biomedical sciences, epidemiology and global health. And I've been in research for about 18 years. I was at UCL for 11 years until 2015. I've been here working in global health research at the University of Southampton since then. So I'm just going to start with a couple of quiz questions. As Tabitha started with some nice Mentimeter stuff. Here's my quiz question: is what was I doing across the afternoon of 31st of October, just a few days back? You have two options. Was I A, relaxing with a coffee and a biscuit, or B, was I, whilst in Ghana, in fact, in the 2 hours before the submission deadline, exchanging a frantic series of messages with our UK finance team, trying to get the finances on a grant application to fix the astonishingly complex guidance, a guidance which itself was spread across 3 separate documents. And perhaps given the topic of the conversations today, you'll not be surprised to hear I was doing B. And a colleague very kindly lent me some office space so I could sit there and on Microsoft Teams message our finance team as we try to work out how to disentangle the numbers and get them appropriate for the funder. This was UKRI, which is not a straightforward funder to apply to, and the guidance involved proportions of the funding that could go to the UK institution, proportions that could go overseas, the types of funding you can ask for, and obviously the amounts. And as you kind of adjust one number, the proportions change, which took it over the funding limits or took it over the funding amount that could go overseas and things like that. So it did take that 2 hours to get it just so, and then kind of submitted over the line, which had 2 or 3 processes to it. It was a stressful time. So I'm going to tell you not to do that, whilst having done that myself just a few days ago. The second quiz question is a few months back. What was I doing 3 days before the grant deadline? Was I A, relaxing with a coffee and a biscuit, or B, was I realizing that the case for support document needed to be font size 11 rather than 10, and changing the font size to make it bigger, then pushed it 1.5 pages over the maximum length of document allowed. And of course, there I was also doing B. Font size of case for support is something you're never taught in grant writing school, but it is important because if you don't realize that, or if it's kind of somewhere buried in the guidance you don't see first up, then you might have a case for support that does not meet the overall guidance. But you notice here I've emphasized the 3 days bit at the top of the screen. There was no panic. It was mildly frustrating on my part that I had to do a bit of extra work to condense the text and work out what to leave and what to take out, but no panic. I had 3 days to do it. So there, that was better for me. So I mean, I've kind of illustrated already why doing the administration on the grant application deadline day is a bad idea, but there's lots of reasons why leaving it to the last minute is not a good thing to be doing. So actually, for example, my university's internal deadline for highlighting that I want to put in a bid is 3 weeks prior to the deadline. Other universities may well differ, but this is what our university wants us to do. We don't need the final application. At that point, we basically want to alert them that I'm going to be costed into a grant as a co-applicant or investigator 3 weeks prior to the deadline. That's what we need to do. And so if someone was to approach me today and say, would you like to collaborate? Deadline is tomorrow. And that's just not an option for me. If only because I need more time than that to alert all the kind of administrative teams around my university who might need to sign off on the application. And I mentioned UKRI a minute ago. It's a great funder in terms of the work that they fund and the research that comes out of them, but applying to them is a pain in the backside. Among the things that you need to do there is you need to sign up for an account in their system, which is fine, but then that account needs to be approved by someone at your institution. And you never quite know who that's going to be. It's probably someone in your R&D directorate or similar. But do you know who that approval will be in your institution? If you've got a few days to find out, then that's not too bad, is it? But again, if you've got a deadline of today or tomorrow, then trying to work out who the person is and realizing they're off sick or on holiday might be a problem and create stress. When you're applying for a grant, you often need lots of different things from some or all of the individuals involved in your study. This can include things like CVs in a specific format. You might need their ORCID ID, you might need date of birth, you might need a declaration around conflicts of interest, you might need their signature, letters of support from someone else at their institution, lots of things like that. Again, all of that can take time to compile. Submission itself might involve the approval of, and therefore some button clicking from several other people. You or other co-investigators, your head of department, your finance team. There's a few people who might need to get involved to push the grant application over the line. And of course, that can all take time. So in advance, again, around the administration of the grant, do check out the submission process. Who needs to do what? Who needs to create accounts? Who needs to log in and click approve? What is the actual process of submission? And do that well ahead of the deadline. In essence, submitting a grant application is rarely as simple as attaching a Word document to an email. If you get a funder where that's the case, then happy days, that's a great time. But certainly some of the bigger funders often have more complex systems that you need to apply through. So certainly among many of the lessons learned from myself down the years, as I illustrated earlier, even if you're an experienced grant writer, you don't always get the process right. You have many other things to do. And that afternoon in Accra a few days ago is something that's fresh in my memory, and I would try to avoid in the future. But sorting out the non-science bits, it takes longer than you think because there's so many non-science bits to do. It's not just writing a cracking application, which in itself, of course, is complex, and perhaps we can discuss more here today. But there's other bits you need to do as well, and that guidance available might go across many pages, many documents that you have to kind of loop in and work out which bit is where in those documents. Can be very complex, often not user friendly, which is a bit of a shame, I feel, but that's often what we are applying to. So yeah, read the guidance notes thoroughly, way in advance of the deadline, and then before you hit those submit buttons, read it all again, just to check that you haven't missed the font size for the case of support and things like that. Do engage with potential or anticipated collaborators weeks ahead of the deadline. Again, like I say, with my university, it needs to be a minimum of 3 weeks. I don't need to see the final application then. I just need to know that you want me on the bid so that I can then alert people on my end. This is also true, actually. A few years back, I had a grant application rejected because there was a 700-word maximum field and we put 702 words in it. This was a small grant application at another university that I was a partner on. They were overloaded with applications and were looking for reasons to boot a few of them out, basically. So if there were any applications that didn't fully meet the guidance, then they weren't even reviewed. They were rejected for these reasons. And our reason was we were 2 words over in one of the fields. So that was a frustrating time, but I promise you that was also a lesson learned. Grant applications are a competitive business. And so ultimately, the reality is most submissions are rejected. But I would encourage people who are sort of new to the field not to be too disheartened by this. Keep trying is the kind of the key word there. Like I said at the start, I've had more applications rejected than I've had successes. It is important to keep trying to build your team and to work out when other opportunities might emerge. And of course, once you've written a grant application, even if it is unsuccessful, you now have ideas on paper, you have a team in place. That does actually make future submissions a little bit more straightforward. You've already got the thinking in place, you've already got your collaborators there. You sort of still need to obviously kind of look at the guidance, the submissions process and so on, but you've got your ideas written down. That helps with future applications. And I would also emphasize people to build your networks as widely as you possibly can. You've no idea when kind of brief encounters, when 5-minute conversations at meetings and conferences might come in useful several years later. If you were speaking to someone who's an expert in clinical trials or knows about HIV or whatever it be, you might be able to kind of build a future relationship with them kind of from that initial conversation. And on grant submission deadline day, ultimately you want to be relaxed, not having to frantically borrow office space to send a series of messages to your finance team. That's the aim. So everything should be kind of focused on that when it comes near the deadline, you want it already gone, someone else's problem. So there are a few things that you can do, such as what I and also Bernard have outlined here, to help make deadline day as relaxed as possible when you can have a cup of coffee and a biscuit. So yeah, thank you for everyone for coming and for listening in. But yeah, I will stop there. I'll stop sharing screen. And Tabitha, perhaps I'll hand back to you if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Michael. Very informative. Yesterday in a different live session for a different course, a facilitator said you need to be able to fail forward. And I quite like that expression, because you touched on, you know, if a grant proposal is not accepted, then that's a lesson learned and you can take that forward. So I quite like that, fail forward. So someone asked if you would both be fine with sharing the slides with everyone. Michael has already agreed. Bernard, would you be fine with that as well?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so I'll make sure the slides are shared after the session. We don't have any questions in the chat so far, so if you have any questions at all about anything related to grant proposal writing or anything you heard just now, feel free to raise your hand on Zoom or even just unmute yourself and speak, or if you're more comfortable with that, also just put your question in the chat. Do we have any questions at all? Or even any experiences you want to share about your own stories of writing grant proposals?
Yeah, I have, we have some stories to share as well, so please feel free. I happen to be a science journalist, so if you don't ask questions, I can easily throw you some questions. Yeah.
Hello everyone, this is Buna. This is not mine. This is not a question, but I just want to say Bernard and Michael for the very wonderful presentation, and I also thoroughly enjoyed going through it. So since there is no question, just I'm throwing some from my side. So what are the key learning, like as Michael already mentioned, like from the failure of the proposal also we can improve and go ahead and plan. But if the struggle of what I feel during grant application is sometimes, there are the competitive interest. Like I want to, like now also there are 2-3 opportunities and I want to work because that is completely related to my field, and 2-3 team is also there. So how to manage those multiple tasks, or how to choose? So if based on your experience, if you can share some tips, then yeah.
Okay, I will go with this one, and then Michael may follow if he has any. I'm sure he will have many. So it is not easy in terms of grant application that require multiple teams. For example, currently I'm working on an Associate National Institute of Health funded project in Ghana. And at the time they made a call, they were focusing on Sub-Saharan Africa, but they did make it clear that they will not fund one project, more than one project from a country. So my team were applying one, and then we heard another team was also applying, and we had to come together as one to now submit an application. Now, luckily we were successful, but I can tell you that managing it wasn't easy at all, because some teams have their own objectives or goals. You also have theirs. You have to come together and agree. In fact, it nearly cost us the application, because one of the objectives for one of the teams, we wanted them to consider not including it before, because we felt it wasn't likely to be more sustainable. And they said, no, we still want it. So they kept it. And because of that, reviewers, scored us a bit low, but the quality of the proposal was such that the funder, NIH, was still interested in it. And so overall, the quality was higher than that minor problem. But if we were not lucky, it would have cost us. So sometimes when you don't have a very, very strong team, you can start off by flying on the wings of other people. You use that one to get your experience. Sometimes it may be an idea that it may come from you, but you may not be very presentable in terms of like you leading maybe an issue. So you can join a team that you already know, if that is possible. And if you don't know them at all, that is where sometimes it can become an issue. So you need a little more time to know people as you work together. So yeah, I think this is what I will share.
Yeah. Thank you, Bernard. Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bernard, and thank you, Buna, for kicking us off with the question. While Bernard was talking, we actually got quite a few questions in the chat, which is great. So I'll start from the top. Please excuse my pronunciation of names, and you may correct me if I am doing wrong, but Kilima asked, how about networking matters? I am not sure if review grants are completely objective. How blind are blind reviews? Who would like to answer that?
I suppose, I can contribute at least a bit. I think mostly when you're reviewing a grant, you need to know who the team is. So from the reviewer's perspective, then it's not the researchers are not anonymized, because you need to be able to judge the skill of the team. I think I have once or twice reviewed a grant blind initially as part of kind of a phase 1 review. And I think then in phase 2, they then added in the project team. That was to try to sort of increase objectivity over any subjectivity about the team members. But you need to know who the team is at some point in the review process to be able to judge if they have the kind of the skills and capacity to carry out the research. So it does, I mean, as the commenter says, it does introduce that element of objectivity, or subjectivity rather. It's not completely objective. And it is also, as Bernard said, it is sort of something we all do in our spare time, alongside things like reviewing journal manuscripts. It's a kind of a similar process in a way. So again, if you can sort of make things as kind of nice and clear for us when we are reviewing the grant applications, then that kind of might improve our mood as we're sat on the sofa or sat on the bed late at night. And it will kind of increase chances of success, at least slightly. So yeah, reviewing grants can't be completely blind throughout the process, because we do need to see who it is who's doing it. And that's also another reason for having a really good team in place, a right blend of kind of experience and early career researchers.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, let me add something to that
sorry.
quickly. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, so in addition to what Michael has said, there are some few applications too that the funders don't even want to see who is applying. It's crazy. They know from their system who submitted the application, but they may have just a 2-pager, and all they want is the idea. And in fact, one example is the Gates Foundation. I have been unsuccessful in many of such applications, but I have been successful in one of them. So it's like a 2-page article, like a 2-pager, and all they want is your proposal, what you plan to do, how you plan to sustain it. They don't want your name, even the name of the institution. If they see it in it, that is a ground for disqualification. So there are some minor, but in general, I mean, like Michael said, in general, we want to know who is applying. That is why we call for CVs, for example. I mean, then why do we even need CV if the person applying is not needed? In the case of the one I told you, for example, after a grant application has been selected for consideration, then they will reach out to the one who submitted it and now find out whether the person qualifies to do it. That's a very interesting one, but it depends on how the core places it. And generally, yes, I will agree with Michael that definitely we will need the names. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Bernard. There's a question for Michael. What do you suggest about the word limitation, including the title and keywords?
Well, with any grant application, you'll be given guidance from the funder about how long it should be, and that usually extends to individual fields within the application. Hence why with that one example I gave of when we put in 702 words into a field that had a limit for 700, and it was rejected because of it. So I think even sometimes we will have restrictions on the length of the title. It might be kind of 200 characters long. So reading the guidance thoroughly as to exactly how many words you can put in each field, or how long a document you attach to it can be. The case for support is often a document you write yourself. That might be a Word document, and it might be 20,000 characters long, including spaces or excluding spaces, or 6 pages long, maximum in font size 10. And the guidance will vary depending upon the funder and depending upon the call. So just read the guidance, check what the limits are for each field. It's usually fairly clear, but that is the way to find out how long things can be, and therefore how much information you could and should put in.
Thank you very much, Michael. Cash is asking, any tips for where to get support or training on theory of change or delivery chain risk maps? Either of you, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, okay. So, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know Tasha, working with her on a couple of other grants. I was kind of hoping she might be able to tell me about theory of change models, but clearly not. I
mean, I've had a go at it, but I'd never really had any training, so I just kind of took a shot at it, and it turned out how it turned out. But I mean, it's just something that we don't really get training on until you have to do one.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's also my experience of it as well. Though I have spoken with INASP colleagues a little bit who kind of run AuthorAid and kind of oversee this meeting about theory of change, and did sort of take a bit of anecdotal advice from them. So I think there are kind of sort of global health kind of policy groups and support organizations that would be happy to kind of provide a bit more kind of support at times of writing. And I know there is theoryofchange.org, I think, which has got examples of useful models, and occasionally the funder themselves do sort of specify what they might want in a theory of change model.
Yeah, so I've just seen that NIHR have got a theory of change template or whatever that they now have, but I don't think it was there a couple of years ago.
No, but I think my general technique here is, as and when I need a theory of change, is to go and ask someone who's done them a bit more frequently than I have. But no, I agree that I think training from the funders as to what they expect in a theory of change is something that would be useful going forward. So it's not something I can be too helpful with. Sorry, Bernard, you may know more.
Oh no, so I mean, I think that you are on point. I think there are also sometimes similar names for theory of change. Sometimes they will call it like logic model and things like that. So as you look for information on theories of change, the logic model obviously also is a graphical representation of the theory of change. And sometimes like we have some resources where, I mean, the one Michael mentioned, for example, where you definitely find, but if you see logic model document, they could also be of use to you. But I just wanted to add a little to the previous question about the word count, the word limit. Sometimes also it may not be a word count, it will not be like a character count, but it will be a page limit. And I've had an instance where, in fact, someone told me this 2-page application, they submitted it, and it turned out to be a 3-page one when they were uploading the PDF. A blank PDF that had just one sentence on the last one resulted in the grant being rejected. Okay, so it may not be the word count, but please, those page limitations and all those things also count, and you have to look for the information in the requirements of the application. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Bernard. The next question comes from Namara. Thank you, team. This was an important course. We learned a lot. How can all trainees remain in touch? I'm assuming you're referring to the MOOC that has just been running on research and proposal writing. If you did mean the overall course that some of you have been taking part in, we have a big network of researchers, mostly early career researchers, that is global, and you can sign up through the website link that I'm putting in the chat right now. So authorate.info. It's free to sign up, and that gives you access to a huge database of researchers globally, a mentorship scheme, a lot of free training resources. And if you follow us on Twitter and Facebook or LinkedIn, you'll also hear about any live events that we're doing. So we're doing monthly webinars and informal networking events. And that's usually how our course participants and just network members stay in touch. Okay, so the next question is again about word limits, and we've already covered that. So I'll jump to the next one from Nantu. Any special suggestion for the early career researchers for writing grants? Who'd like to answer this?
Well, I guess if you are leading on the grant application, then you've got to make sure you are kind of appropriately leading it. If this is your first grant, applying for a £2 million pot of money is probably going to be unrealistic. That's where, as was said earlier, you can sort of join in with more experienced researchers to kind of learn the tools of the trade. That there are small grant applications out there that are suitable and indeed aimed at new researchers. So one I would highlight is the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene grants, RSTMH. They're for £5,000 and aimed at new researchers. So I think look at the grant, the call for funding, and see if it's something you could front up, or if it would be better if you joined in with an experienced researcher. And kind of just learn from experienced researchers along the way, such that you are in the near future able to apply for grants yourself as the lead. I think as kind of sort of general points, that would be something that I could raise here.
Thank you. Logos Rari, who's also a facilitator on the research and proposal writing MOOC, mentioned something else about blind reviews and networking. She says, it's not uncommon to find out from the grant application of the research proposal which lab or researcher it is from. That is possible in big grants. Levuka had a contribution saying that was high level of teamwork. I'm assuming that's in reference to your story of figuring out the administrative process of the proposal. Oh, and Logosari added, but mostly the identifiers are removed during review to make them blind. Another question from Tash saying, how do you actually get into grant reviewing? Interesting question.
This is a very interesting one. I attended a conference in Sweden, and then someone working for a funder, after I had made the presentation, approached me and said, I like your presentation. We do have proposals that get to be aligned to the kind of things that you do. Would you be interested in reviewing such grants? Now, I hadn't reviewed grant before, so it would have been easier to say, no, I haven't done it before. But I said, oh, why not? Yeah, I haven't done it before, but I can try. And so then initially they sent me 2 applications. But before I started reviewing, I had to go on their website and also outside of the website and learn about grant reviews, okay? Because I was less about, I think 6 years after my first degree. So you can imagine. So I did that and I reviewed the first 2, and they were so impressed that subsequently they will even bring like 5, 6, So I think the thing is, if you don't have a car and somebody says, hey, I want to buy you a car. You may not be a driver, you haven't driven before, but if you are interested in it, you can be truthful and say, yes, I haven't driven before, but because of you, I will learn how to drive, and then hopefully when you bring a car, I'll be able to drive it. So I think that don't undersell yourself. If you have an expertise in something and you haven't even won a grant in that aspect before, and you get that opportunity, embrace it, learn it, and then you can begin from there. Because there are several benefits of reviewing grant. Through that one, for example, I began getting grant from that funder, because once you are reviewing, you know they are all the things they need and stuff like that. You also get to know what others have done. It doesn't mean you are taking other people's ideas, but obviously, just like reviewing manuscripts, you know, you also get to learn when you are reviewing other people's manuscripts. So it's a good thing. It's a very good question. But yeah, if you haven't done it before and it comes to you, go for it. There are times also when they will call for potential reviewers. Some funders will call for reviewers. And then if you get the opportunity, you can apply. If you are successful, take it. If not, you keep trying. And I think once you are able to get a grant from some funders, normally they may come to you also with the hope that you will be reviewing for other funders. So that eventually becomes easier over time. So that is what I would say. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Anything to add, Michael?
I suppose, yeah, also that if you are a member of a professional society that has small grants, I mean, for example, like RSTMH, they also ask for reviewers for their grant submissions every year. So I often review for them. And if you have submitted a grant to any funder, then you are on their systems at that point. No doubt listed under a few different keywords. So as and when they have future grants that come in under that and under those keywords, then you might at that point get contacted by them to review for them. So I think if people have a few grants under their belt and are interested in reviewing, then someone like RSTMH is a good place to keep an eye on in the global health world anyway, and quite a good place to kind of learn about the grants reviewing process. Yeah, the funders should give you strong guidance as to what they expect to see, and it can be a little bit like peer reviewing for a journal in some cases, in terms of some of the steps you have to go through. So yeah, I think I would just add those.
Thanks. A question from Patani. Sometimes when you approach collaborators and you send them a draft, they at times take long to respond until maybe the deadline day, despite several reminders. How best could you handle this as a junior researcher, because most of the collaborators we approach are seniors and you can't push them?
That's a good question. I suppose if a senior collaborator is too busy to get to your proposal, then perhaps a lesson learned that although they might be a big name, they might not actually be useful on the project. It is a tricky one. So you obviously don't want to be rude to them, you don't want to hassle them, but you've got your own deadlines to adhere to and your own kind of career to try to enhance. So there's not any simple answer, but a good senior collaborator should give you their time to develop the proposal, not just expected to be submitted with their name on it. So I think as early as possible, ask these potential senior collaborators, will you have the time to read the grant? And maybe give them a deadline as well, which is perhaps, like say, 2 weeks before the deadline. Would you be able to read this for me? And then they also know what's expected of them as early as possible. You're kind of in their diary, so to speak. So that might be one approach to minimize the likelihood of senior staff simply not getting back to you. Again, leave as much time as possible for this bit as well is also important.
Yeah, let me add two cases here. So one, I wanted to work with a senior researcher. We agreed, we talked and stuff like that. But then after some time, I wasn't hearing from her. I kept getting in touch and still there was no response. So in the end, we couldn't submit the application. A second one, I got in touch with a senior researcher, a different person, and he was interested. And then after some time, I will call, I will not get a response. I will send an email, there was no response. Now I learned from the first one. I got a plan B. Okay, so whilst the other person was not responding, I got a plan B in place, started working. Luckily, things were flowing there. And just 2 days before the deadline, the first person comes and say, oh, I'm sorry, we wouldn't be able to do this and do something like that. So maybe we can consider another time. So I said, thank you so much. I let it go. But I worked on the other one. And in fact, by that time, we had even we were just left with submission a day before the deadline, So we were able to submit, and luckily we were successful. So I think that you must always consider a plan B. People may be highly qualified in something, but if they are not there, work will go on. So you want to have people who might potentially also can play a role, but may not be considered too short, or like the key people per se, but they may have the expertise. If you can assemble a team together, it is not that easy. And that is why I agree with Michael about timing. The time is very, very important, but don't look up to someone who's so big in the field. And, if the person is not giving you a chance, equally, there could be some other people who can help. But if you approach them earlier on, it helps. And it's not also something like that we do. Just like when you're submitting a manuscript, you don't submit a manuscript to more than one person, one journal at the same time. So if there's one person that you really want to be on, and the person is similar to another person who can do it, if the first person doesn't go, you don't want to approach the two at the same time, because then if both say, yes, let's go for it, you may have a hard time. But you approach the first one, and then if you see things are not working, then you go to the next, and I'm sure things could work out sometime. Still, sometimes you may not be successful, but sometimes you could be successful. So we keep trying. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you both. The Gusrari has another tip on networking. She says, networking helps to put your face and name there in the research community, so others in the field know who you are and also help find new collaborators, etc. Sairaj says, thank you, Bernard sir and Michael sir, for the enlightening presentations. Just one question from my end. Is there any plus point for socially relevant topics or projects for ease of grant application approval?
Depends a bit on the funder and their aims for the call. If the funder is interested in early stage drug discovery, where you're playing with molecules in the laboratory, you're quite a long way there from it being socially relevant at that stage. If it's a funder that's got a focus on improving population health in sub-Saharan Africa, then things that are sort of kind of socially relevant or will have a relatively immediate social impact, that is the aim of the funder. So that is how the applicant should be thinking. So, I mean, I suppose the answer is yes, if the funder is asking for it. But again, it goes back to sort of checking the guidance and checking if the funder is right for you, as Bernard said in his presentation. Is it the right kind of call? Yeah, I think that would be my answer there.
Anything to add, Bernard? Or are you?
No, I think it's a great one. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. All right. Kilmark says, thank you for answering the question. Tayeba says, how much importance do the reviewers give to unpublished relevant pilot or feasibility work of the team applying for the grant? Who would like to go?
Quite a lot of importance there. One thing we do look at as reviewers is, has the team worked together? Are they likely to deliver? So even if your work is still unpublished at that point, if you can point to examples of research you've done that you've managed to collect data in a similar setting, I think that's actually super important. So yeah, I think that is a good question to raise, and I think it's something that you should mention in grant applications, your prior working, whether that be through a citation of a journal paper or simply being able to mention that you've got this work done or ongoing, and it's at this stage unpublished. So yeah, a good question, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me also add that sometimes even when a feasibility study or a pilot study hasn't yet been published, obviously, like Mike said, you can include the result in it. But now that we also have preprints, if the journal you plan to submit an article to is not against preprint, it's always very helpful to also cite even your preprint publication. That way, reviewers can go in there and then see, because there are some grants writing, because you have word count limitation, you can't put certain things. And some reviewers, especially if you're a junior and you haven't done much, they want to see your work before, and so they can go. Also, it just also depends on the type of grant, even for the same funder. for example, with the National Institute of Health in the US, there are particular grants that if you're an early career researcher, they tell reviewers that, hey, this person is an early career researcher, so don't focus too much on preliminary data. Okay, so they tell them that, and so that. But even for the same funder, if you go for a different type of application, they won't tell reviewers that you will be treated equally like a seasoned researcher or grant writer, and so it all depends on several considerations, your prior work, and also how you are able to demonstrate that you have done it before. Because like Michael said, if you haven't done something before and you are proposing to do something, you haven't published, they can see, it's going to be a challenge for reviewers to say, yes, let's give you the money to do it, so let's give them the money to do it. So yeah, they could be very useful. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a similar question from, I'm really sorry if I mispronounced this, Geo Tinat. How much is the importance of a proposal backed by data of previous work or similar work?
I suppose that's similar to the previous question, isn't it?
Yeah.
A track record is very useful and can be very important to show that you've delivered on previous ideas. I mean, a grant application is a sales pitch, basically. You're trying to sell your idea to the funder to choose you above other people. So the more convincing you can be with your sales pitch, the more likely you are to get the funding awarded. So again, if you have previous work there, and cite it, tell us about it, as a preprint or just kind of mention it in the application, whatever. And yeah, that is a useful and important thing to do, I would say.
Thank you. Logiswari has written something in response to Patani, so I'll let you read that in your own time. Someone with no name present says, Eclipse teams from Tigray are attending. Thank you for the presentation. There are a few questions from the team. One, some grant calls are in favor of senior researchers like PhD holders. Junior researchers with few or no publications are not welcomed. How do we proceed with such challenges?
Yeah, thank you. I think if a grant is specifically looking for particular groups of people, and you look at it and you don't qualify, you just let it go. It's unfortunate, sometimes your idea may be great, but either you let it go or you sell the idea to someone and then work with that person to get a grant. It's sometimes very difficult, but it may be the way to get it. I recently found an application, they were requiring particular professionals to be involved in it. And then my team doesn't include those kind of professionals. And there wasn't enough time for me to invite people, to assemble my team. There wasn't enough time for that. So I just let it go. Because of course they were asking for specialists, medical specialists here and there, so it all depends on what they're asking for. And so one way is just see how best you can. And that is why it's also very good to have a broader network, so that like where you find certain things, you may be able to know who to go to. But some grant applications are just not meant for us. And they may come, but you could still let them go. Ours may come eventually. So this is what I'll basically say. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. A lot of thank yous in the chat to our two speakers. Buna has added to the grant, getting into reviewing grant proposals. She said sometimes if you get a grant before, next time they will invite you to review a grant. So similar to what both Michael and Bernard said. So it started like that for her. Libuka thinks your contributions are very inspiring, Bernard. Roberta asks, how do you find collaborators? Before you answer, I'm gonna put some links in the chat again. So, we have some networking events, and we also have the author website where you can find people with similar research fields that you can contact and talk to. And we also have a Google discussion group where regularly people ask for collaborators on certain things. So I'll put those links in the chat and I'll hand over to Michael and Bernard in the meantime.
But you can also look up institutional websites. You can look up who's published in your area recently. Those will kind of illustrate who's working in the field at the moment, who is something new and interesting to share. So again, you can put in keywords into sort of PubMed or any other kind of publications database, or your own or other institutions, other universities, to see who was working in those areas, and then you can try and start some conversations that way, as well as the areas that Tabitha suggested. And also, I've actually found LinkedIn to be quite helpful with communicating with people. I think a few of the projects I'm working on, a few of the publications I've written have come from being connected on LinkedIn and realizing that you and someone else have similar interests. So the use of social media, the use of institutional websites, looking at journal publications, those are all ways to find out who may be interesting to you and might be a current or future partner in research.
Yeah, I will also say that sometimes you have to hunt for collaborators. I remember my Gates grant, I did it in Ethiopia. I wanted to do this project in Ethiopia. I didn't have any collaborator in Ethiopia. So I had to go online and search for potential collaborators. And eventually I was able to find someone who was interested, and luckily we got the grant. So sometimes you have to specifically devote time to looking for places to consider, depending on your expertise. And it's also very important for faculty members or those who are in the universities to provide their contact information in a way that it makes it easier for one to email or call and things like that. In some African universities or in some universities in low and middle income countries, if you go to websites, you can't even find emails of professors and stuff, or in some NGOs, you can't find those. So those can be very challenging if you are looking for someone specifically in that area. But yeah, in addition to what Mike has said, you can always hunt for potential collaborators. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. We have 15 minutes left in the session, so I'll try to get as many questions in as possible. We have Mamadou asking, can you shed some light on budgeting? It can be very sensitive to talk about, especially for a junior working with a senior from different institutions.
I mean, budgeting for a grant is a complex business. So again, leave as much time as possible, because almost every grant I've ever worked on, we're fiddling with the budget kind of way up until just before submission quite often, as kind of ideas change and as people come on board. But you need to cost in things like person time, which might be, for a senior co-investigator, it might be kind of 5% of their time, because they're not doing the research themselves, they are kind of providing senior advice. You would need to show the funders you've got enough person time on it costed into the budget, which might, for example, be kind of one full-time researcher, depending on how much research you want to do. Or it might be a series of data collectors for 6 months or something like that. You need to work out how much they cost, how much they add up to, and is this kind of affordable within the budget. You may also want to cost in things like travel time, if you have laboratory costs for consumables, a cost for ethical approval. There's lots of different items that you might want to include in your budget, but again, check the guide to see what you are allowed to ask for and what you're allowed to claim for. Sometimes you're allowed to budget for the cost of a new laptop, sometimes you're not. So again, included and excluded costs are difficult, but again, it does get complex. So be in touch with your institutional finance office as early as possible, because they should be helpful in this too. And also the kind of the experienced researchers around you who, and hopefully you have one or two on your project, they can also help advise on drafting the budget too. So there's a few things you can do just to kind of ease the burden of budgets, but it is an area that is quite complex. So again, leaving as much time as you possibly can will be beneficial, just to kind of ease the stresses in that area.
Yeah, and just to add that, yeah, it's a very complex issue. And if you find that the budget for personnel is far more than what you are actually going to use, what the intervention is, sometimes it's a big issue actually. And like Michael said, senior colleagues of course, their salaries are very high. So their 5% effort sometimes in terms of amount of money could be even bigger than an early career's 20% effort. And sometimes when you want to navigate it to make it work, it is not easy because people feel like, oh, no, I need this, I need that. And sometimes you want to know also that the things you want to buy are things that will make your objectives, will help you to achieve your objectives. So as you look for those kind of, as you navigate those things, as you plan for budgeting, look at the processes or the methods that you plan to use and see whether they are appropriately costed. So we have what you call, realistic and then also comprehensive budget. Like some budgets, some applications, you have enough place to describe, justification, provide a lot more information. Some of them too, they will just want the key amount that may cost and stuff like that. So if depending on the funder and depending on the type of call, you want to make sure that you satisfy those requirements, because if there is enough space for you to provide information on budget, just saying, stationery, $5,000 without explaining what stationery is sometimes and how many you're going to buy and things like that, sometimes may be an issue. So yeah, it's a budgeting is a big issue, but involving your administrators, obviously, as Mike said, is key as well. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you both. Work says, are there platforms to make appeals following rejection of a grant proposal? What is the chance of these appeals becoming successful, given the ground that funders should also respect the integrity of their reviewers?
Well, when I've had a grant application rejected, I of course immediately want to burn the reviewers of boiling oil. That's my immediate kind of thoughts. But you rarely get the chance to appeal against a rejection. So it can be quite a harsh environment where basically you might have spent hours and hours of effort to simply get, no, sorry, at the end of it. I think the only area where I've appealed once is when actually we got told that our grant application had not met the guidance in terms of the amount of money we were asking for, but actually the guidance itself had changed between the call being released and the submission. So we downloaded the guidance at the time the call was released and followed that guidance, not being aware that the guidance had changed. So we actually did appeal on that basis, that it was unfair to exclude our application. And we were then allowed to continue with part of the review process. But on the whole, assuming there's no error on the part of the funder, then you are unlikely to be allowed to appeal or to find out more about why it was rejected. I personally think all funders should highlight why a grant application has been rejected, because they will have something. They'll have a reviewer comment, they'll have a ranking or a score that can be helpful so you know whether you were close or miles away with it, and it can inform how you go forward. But often you don't, often you just get a simple thank you but no, and rarely will you be allowed to appeal it. It's a bit different to journals where you can sometimes appeal maybe a subjective reviewer's comments, but rarely will it be successful with funders.
Yeah, and some funders who don't want any trouble, or sometimes depending on the call, they will just say the decision of the reviewers are final. So at that stage, if you go to them, they will just refer the guidelines to you that way. Yeah, but yeah, it's sometimes you just it's a tough thing. And like Mike said, when you see a rejection for the first time, do your best to relax a bit, absorb it, come back to it. You can still learn from it, but I can tell you too that sometimes reviewers, the kind of things they say, they are just very unfortunate. I had a grant rejected, and there were 3 reviewers. 2 of them were so highly positive, and 1 was so negative. So because of that, it got rejected. What can you do? You learn from it, and then you just move on sometimes. I mean, obviously, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've had some grant applications rejected when we got super high scores. It kind of indicated how competitive that grant scheme was. I mean, I think we got the scores were out of 7, and we got either 6 or 7 in all aspects, and we were still rejected. And we got very good reviewer comments. And then we did get another one from the UKRI where the scores are out of 6, and we got 3 6s and 2 3s, I think, or something like that. And to my absolute amazement, we won that one. So it can be a little bit of a lottery at times, where you don't always understand the decisions made. Sometimes in your favour, sometimes not. But hence why, if you are rejected, if it's unsuccessful, bad luck, but do try again, is kind of again that key message there, I'd say.
Thank you both. There are no more questions in the chat, but lots of gratitude. Lots of people writing that it was very helpful or insightful for them. So I'm very glad to hear that. Quite a few people have logged off because they had to join other meetings. This is your last chance to ask any last questions before we close. So I'll give you a few seconds. You can also just speak. You don't have to write in the chat. Otherwise, I'll give Michael and Bernard a chance to say any last words, anything they want to share before we log off.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to have this discussion with you. And I would just say that grant writing is a process. It doesn't end with even getting one. Neither does it end with not having any at all. So we have to keep trying. We'll fail many times, but we could also be successful sometimes. So let's keep trying, learn from our mistakes, and hopefully we will get there. Yeah, thank you.
I think also just writing the slides of this session was actually kind of good for me, just to kind of remind myself of some of the things that I kind of do well or don't do well when it comes to submitting a grant application. So it is a constant learning process, as we've said today, where the guidance will be different next time you submit a grant. The aims of the funders will be different next time you submit. Even a different call from the same funder, there might be subtle or clear differences in what they expect of you. So I think it's important to kind of stay on the ball at all times with your grant application, never to take them lightly. They do require your focus and your time. But again, if you can kind of follow some of those kind of perhaps simple approaches in a way, you will increase the chances of success. And you can never guarantee success, but you can increase the chances and reduce the amount of reasons to reject an application. Good luck, everyone, I would say. Hope this has been useful. And yeah, let's all try and help do a bit of public good in the world.
Thank you both. Thank you everyone for joining and also for asking so many great questions. It was a very insightful discussion. Thank you for joining us from so many different countries. The recording will be shared, so the same way you received your invitation for this meeting, you will also receive your recording and the slides that Bernard and Michael have kindly agreed to share. So we hope you have a good rest of the day or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. And we'll see you next time. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.